I had the privilege of introducing our speaker this morning. And an individual sent a book to me last Friday, a friend, and said that the title of the book was Good to Great in God's Eyes. I don't know how many of you have heard of that book, Good to Great in God's Eyes. And as I looked at that book, it talked a lot about what does it mean to be great in God's eyes? What does that mean? I'm so grateful to have an individual, a friend of our university, speak in chapel this morning. He is the author of 13 books. He's directed 12 documentaries, vice president at the Discovery Institute, managing director at their Center for Society and Culture. I can go on and on and on. But one of the things about our speaker is that he has committed himself to the great one, Jesus, and to ensure that the great one, Jesus, is a part of all that he does and a part of the work that God has given him to do in profound and beautiful ways. But beyond all these things, he also has joined the university as our distinguished scholar for American government and Christian civic engagement. And today, he's been working on this for months. It's the launch of one of his 13th book here at Cornerstone University. It's entitled The Bible, Science, and the Battle for America's Soul. It's part of America's 250th Supercentennial celebration. Tremendously well-reviewed. In the back, if you see, these books are in the lobby for sale. Masterful, brilliant, timely, important, and wide-ranging. So would you please join me in welcoming Dr. West? And Dr. West, thank you for your commitment to Jesus and for being a part of our university.
I think most of us probably don't fully appreciate the uniqueness of our country or its revolution. Now, the American Revolution did not lead to a bloodbath. It did not lead to the destruction of churches. It did not end up by installing a dictator or imposing terror on its citizens. For all our nation's various faults and failures, its birth produced a level of civil and religious liberty, economic prosperity, and dedication to equal rights that is hard to match in the history of humankind. Again, I think a lot of us take these things for granted. We shouldn't. Most revolutions produce different results. In fact, most revolutions produce horrific results. Think of the Russian Revolution or Mao and the communist takeover in China. Millions murdered, millions more impoverished or impressed, Christians viciously persecuted. Think in our own day of the Iranian Revolution less than 5 decades ago and what's tragically happening in that country right now. It's hard to argue that the Iranian people are better off today than before their Islamic revolution. In short, the success of America's revolution seems to be a startling exception to the rule. Why? Well, there are many potential answers, but I think one worth considering is that the ideas of America's revolutionaries were much more grounded in a true biblical understanding of human nature and the universe. So what were those ideas articulated by America's founders? Perhaps the most succinct summary can be found in 55 words in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. From the founding of America onward, these propositions provided a justification for human rights, equal treatment under the law, and limited government. They also established a standard by which future Americans could judge the actions of themselves and their nation, which could inspire them to right wrongs, like slavery. The foundational claim was that all men are created equal. Now, in a recent survey, 78% of Americans today say they think this claim is true. But is it really? After all, aren't human beings unequal in all sorts of ways? Unequal in wealth, in talents, in virtue? Were America's founders naive or stupid or even lying by claiming that we are all equal? No, they knew full well that we are unequal in many ways. So where were they getting this idea from? Well, one key source was the Bible. As the founders knew, the Bible teaches that God made of one blood all nations of men, and that all humanity descended from Adam and Eve, whom God originally created in his own image. The founders clearly understood the implications of the biblical account. Physician Benjamin Rush was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and a devout Christian. He wrote, "This divine book," meaning the Bible, "above all others favors that equality among mankind which constitutes the soul of republicanism." Founder James Wilson was a signer of both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, one of just a handful to do both. He was ultimately appointed by George Washington as one of the first justices of the Supreme Court. When discussing the idea that all men are equal, Wilson paraphrased Acts 17:16 when he asserted, "Of one blood all nations are made, from one source the whole human race is sprung." Elsewhere, he explicitly cited Genesis 1:27-28 about us being created in the image of God. Wilson and Rush were Christians, but even though skeptical of Orthodox Christianity among the founders embraced its teaching on equality, John Adams was a Unitarian. But he wrote his son Charles that Christianity was founded on that eternal and fundamental principle of the law of nature, do as you would be done by, and love your neighbor as yourself. Equality is the element of Christianity. Now, the founders thought that the equality preached by the Bible was reinforced by God's general revelation through our reason, our observations, and nature itself. As I discussed in my book, the founders actually thought there were at least 7 ways humans are equal. The first way we are equal, according to John Adams, is that we are all made by the same God, the work of the same artist, children of the same Father Almighty. That's a quote from John Adams. Now, today, many people are used to the idea that belief in a God who creates us is supposed to be a subjective belief based just on our personal faith. But that is not the view that prevailed throughout most of Western history, and it's definitely not the view of America's founders. The founders thought that a belief in a creator God was based on evidence and reflected objective reality. In support of their belief, America's founders drew on a rich intellectual tradition that grounded belief in a creator in our observations of nature. More than 2,000 years ago, Roman philosopher Cicero argued that nature supplies evidence of a creator. Can any sane person believe, Cicero wrote, that all this array of stars and this vast celestial adornment could have been created out of atoms rushing to and fro fortuitously and at random? Or could any other being devoid of intelligence and reason have created them? Not merely did their creation postulate intelligence, but intelligence of a high order. Of course, the Bible teaches the same. In the Old Testament, the psalmist writes, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands." In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." Many early and then later Christian thinkers made similar arguments. Catholic theologian Thomas Aquinas argued that things which lack intelligence, such as natural bodies, act for an end. And when they do that, they show that some intelligent being exists by whom all natural things are directed toward their end. And that being we call God. Protestant reformer John Calvin commented that the elegant structure of the world serves us as a kind of mirror in which we may behold God, though otherwise invisible. Calvin claimed that astronomy, medicine, and all the natural sciences were designed to illustrate the proofs of God's existence. Now, it turns out the rise of modern science in the 16th and 17th centuries reaffirmed this consensus that nature supplied evidence of a creator who created us. Sir Isaac Newton, still regarded as one of the greatest scientists who ever lived, he declared that our most beautiful solar system could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. And he argued that the best argument for an omnipotent and omniscient God is the frame of nature and chiefly the contrivance of the bodies of living creatures. That includes us, our bodies. English philosopher and cleric Samuel Clarke was a friend of Newton, and in his book, A Demonstration of the Being and Attributes of God, Clarke argued that as natural science advanced, the case for atheism retreated. The deeper men inquire into things, the more accurate observations they make, and the more and greater discoveries they find out, the stronger the argument grows for God, he insisted. John Ray was a pioneering English botanist. He wrote a book titled The Wisdom of God Manifested in the Works of Creation, which underwent multiple editions, and claimed there is no more palpable and convincing argument of the existence of a deity than the admirable art and wisdom that discovers itself in the make and constitution, the order and disposition, the ends and uses of all the parts and members of this stately fabric of heaven and earth. Richard Blackmore was a physician and a poet. He penned a 7-part, very, very lengthy poem to demonstrate, as he said, the existence of a God from the marks of wisdom, design, contrivance, and the choice of ends and means which appear in the universe. Leading theologians during the rise of modern science expressed similar views. Anglican Bishop Joseph Butler argued that to an unprejudiced mind, 10,000 instances of design in nature cannot but prove a designer. And French Catholic Archbishop Francois Fenelon wrote a book arguing that all nature shows the existence of its maker. So this is something that both Catholics and Protestants agreed on. In line with these ideas, let's bring it back to America. Notable signers of the Declaration of Independence saw evidence for God, the Creator, in nature as well. The Reverend John Witherspoon was president of what is known today as Princeton University. He was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He taught James Madison and many other leading figures of the American founding. Witherspoon explained that one way we can know God exists is by contemplating the universe in all its parts, observing that it contains many irresistible proofs that it could not be eternal, could not be without a cause, and that this cause must be intelligent. Founder James Wilson wrote that God formed man with wisdom and design, and he argued that if the beautiful order exhibited by inanimate nature reflects God's intelligent design, how much more so should the rational part of creation, human beings, us, be subject to God's design and care? Now, Benjamin Franklin was not a Christian, he was a Unitarian, but he was on the committee that drafted the Declaration of Independence. Franklin created his own private liturgy for use in worshiping God. The section on the adoration of God had him affirming that nature testifies to its creator. These are Franklin's words. Thy wisdom, thy power, and thy goodness are everywhere clearly seen, in the air and in the water, in the heavens and on the earth. Thou providest for the various winged fowl and the innumerable inhabitants of the water. Thou givest cold and heat, rain and sunshine in their season, and to the fruits of the earth increase. Benjamin Franklin's private liturgy included a section where he instructed himself to read selections from the writings of natural philosophers and theologians who thought nature showed evidence of a creator. That long list that I went through that list because those are some of the people that actually Benjamin Franklin recommended reading. Writers like John Ray, Richard Blackmore, and Archbishop Fenelon. Then we have Thomas Jefferson, was the Declaration of Independence's primary drafter. Again, a Unitarian, not a Christian, but he likewise believed that the discoveries of natural science provided a rational grounding for belief in a God who created us. Writing to John Adams in 1823, Jefferson declared, I hold without appeal to revelation that when we take a view of the universe, its parts, general or particular, it is impossible. It's impossible for the human mind not to perceive and feel a conviction of design, consummate skill, and indefinite power in every atom of its composition. So again, the first way we are all equal, according to the founders, is that we all owe our existence to God, and that is a truth they thought was confirmed, not just by the Bible, but also by natural science. They sort of reaffirmed each other. Now, a second way humans are equal, according to the founders, is that we are rational beings. In the words of John Adams again, we are all possessed of minds, alike in essence, having all the same reason. Unlike insects or reptiles or whales, humans are capable of exercising rationality and voluntary action at a level that outstrips any other creature on earth. A third way humans are equal, according to the founders, is that we possess a moral sense, an ability to grasp the first principles of morality and act accordingly. According to John Witherspoon, our moral sense is what is called in scripture and common language conscience. It's the law which our Maker has written upon our hearts. A fourth way humans are equal, according to the founders, is that humans are uniquely fit for religion. As John Witherspoon again observed, we are distinguished from other living creatures on earth by our knowledge of God and a future state. Only humans ask questions about God, or build places of worship, or seek the ultimate meaning of the universe. No matter how much I may love dogs don't do that. Mosquitoes don't worship God, they know, or ask questions about God. Dandelions don't. Okay, a fifth way all humans are equal according to the founders is that we all possess eternal souls as well as physical bodies. Founder James Wilson argued that man is composed of a body and a soul intimately connected. The body in its present state is a mansion well fitted for the temporary residence of its noble inhabitant, but in its renewed state, it will be endowed with the power of retaining that fitness forever. Now, these are all positive ways in which human beings are equal, according to the founders. But there's a sixth way, actually very critical way, that we are equal, according to the founders, that is negative. We are all sinful and prone to corruption. That's one reason we need government. In the words of James Madison, one of the framers of the Constitution, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. But of course, we aren't. The founders' distrust of human nature had deep roots in the Christian emphasis on human sinfulness, an idea that pervaded much of American colonial history, especially in Puritan New England. There, generations of children learned reading from the New England Primer, which began in their ABCs. A was, in Adam's fall, we sinned all. Harry Jaffa, one of the great scholars of the American founding, aptly summarized the implications of both the positive and negative aspects of human equality. He said that in the founders' view, we should recognize that human beings are neither beasts nor gods. And this means that no one has the right to govern other human beings as God may be said rightfully to govern the world, or as human beings may be rightfully, govern the beasts of the field. The seventh way human beings are equal, according to America's founders, is an equality of rights. If all human beings owe their very existence to the same creator, then our essential capacities as humans are not accidents of history or the gift of politicians or any other human being. They come from God himself. That means our rights to use those capacities come from God and cannot rightfully be taken away from us by another human being. Not granted by government, they can't rightfully be taken away by government. Because we're all equal in these fundamental ways, the founders insisted that just governments are based on our consent. In the words of founder James Wilson, no one has a right to any authority over another without his consent. All lawful government is founded on the consent of those who are subject to it. No elite is so superior that its members have a right to rule over others unilaterally by virtue of their superiority. That's why the founders thought public policy decisions should be made by elected officials who are accountable to the people, not by unelected and unaccountable experts. Unfortunately, according to a new national survey conducted in conjunction with my book, many Americans disagree with some of the founding's key ideas. For example, only 38% of Americans now believe that our rights come from God. And in fact, it's true even for self-identified Christians. Although self-identified Protestants, it's, I think, like 51 or 52%. But overall, only 38% of Americans now believe our rights come from God. Likewise, many Americans no longer believe that the purpose of government is limited to securing unalienable rights. And many Americans no longer think government needs to be by consent of the governed. So what happened? Well, as I discussed in my book, at the time of the Declaration of Independence, the founders drew support from their ideas from the Bible, we've talked some about that, from philosophy and the natural science of their day. But within just a few decades, new ideas came to the forefront in America that led to a frontal assault on the Declaration's vision of equality, liberty, unalienable rights, and limited government under God. Much of this assault was waged in the name of science, especially Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. According to the Declaration's new critics, science now proved unequivocally that humans were not equal, nor were they created by God or endowed by him with unalienable rights. Humans evolved through an unguided process, and any rights they possessed were invented by those humans who had sufficient power to enforce them. And so these rights lasted only so long as those in power were willing to grant them. Moreover, because humans are fundamentally unequal, They do not need to be governed by their consent. The masses should be ruled instead by elites in the name of science. Now, some good news. I would argue that science today is actually pointing back to the truths articulated in the Declaration of Independence. The first way science today is corroborating the truths of the Declaration is that it's showing once again there is evidence in nature for a creator. As my Discovery Institute colleague Stephen Meyer points out in his book, Return of the God Hypothesis, science has established once more that there was a beginning to the universe, requiring a creator to bring it into existence. Science has revealed also that the laws of physics and chemistry are exquisitely fine-tuned to enable life, pointing to nature's intelligent design. Finally, science has discovered that our DNA is like a software code, and code requires a coder. In many ways, I would argue we're back to the state of affairs at the time of America's founding, when Thomas Jefferson could write about people pointing to the heavens above and to the earth beneath and to the waters under the earth to argue for a first cause of the universe, possessing intelligence and power in the production and intelligence in the design and preservation of the system. Now, a second way that science is now supporting the truths of the Declaration is that it's further illuminating the ways in which we're all equal. The case for human equality starts with human exceptionalism, the idea that we humans as a class possess unique capabilities that make us much more like each other than any of us are to other animals. Current science supports human exceptionalism. It reveals how the human capacities for speech and language, for technological advancement, for moral reflection and action all make us vastly different from other animals. Human exceptionalism is simply true no matter what some of the more dense members of our species might try to assert. Last year, Harvard primatologist Christine Webb published a book titled The Arrogant Ape, The Myth of Human Exceptionalism and Why It Matters. Webb's book, which has received kudos from many, recycles yet again what I would call a rather silly claim that humans as a class are not unique or special. Ironically, Webb begins her book by quoting Shakespeare, apparently oblivious to the fact that the works of Shakespeare are a pretty obvious example of the clear difference between humans and every other known creature on Earth. Or maybe Webb still believes that enough monkeys typing away on enough keyboards for enough time will somehow produce the works of Shakespeare. If she thinks that, I have a piece of swampland to sell her in Florida. But current science is not just showing that we humans are exceptional as a class, as my friend Christian neurosurgeon Michael Egner points out in his book, The Immortal Mind. Science is also showing that each of us possesses an immaterial soul that will survive death. Not only that, we possess minds with the free will to deliberate and make choices. We aren't robots made out of meat, contrary to the claims of some scientific materialists. Science is also showing that humans are genetically equal to each other and that no ethnic group is biologically inferior to others, contrary to past assertions by many Darwinian biologists. Now, for those of us who are Christians, I think there are several important takeaways here. So even if I put you to sleep with the rest of my talk, just wake up now for the takeaways that you can take away. First, the foundations of our republic are not in conflict with Christianity. In fact, they draw on key Christian beliefs about the existence of a creator, the reality of sin, the need for government to be limited because government is not God, and the truth that all humans are equal because we are created in God's image. Christians should feel at home in America because its foundations were shaped by biblical truths. And that's not true of a lot of societies, but we have that blessing. Second, Christians don't need to feel embarrassed or bashful about standing up for biblical teachings such as the existence of a creator and the reality that humans are made in God's image. God's general revelation reinforces these same truths and gives us common ground to discuss these ideas with non-Christians. Third, if we believe that every person is created in God's image, Christians of all people should be at the forefront of defending the idea that all humans are created equal. That means defending the value of human life from conception to natural death. It means making sure that we treat people of all classes fairly as human beings created in the image of God. It means pushing back against some rising voices in our culture, including some self-identified Christians, sadly, who are advocating today for ethnic hostility. Finally, it means making sure that we are treating others in our own lives as valuable to God. So I'd urge you right now to think, is there anyone in your life, in our lives that we know, who we have written off as somehow beneath us or unimportant or maybe just hard to like? Is there anyone in our lives who we need to go out of our way to affirm their worth as someone created in God's image? As we approach the 250th anniversary of our republic, let us be thankful for the unchanging truths on which it rests. And let us dedicate ourselves to defending and communicating those truths that we might keep our republic for another generation. Thank you.